Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your hosts, TV, aka TV on basketball, alongside my co-host Jay, aka the Knockdown Jay. How's it going, my guy?
It's going good, man. NBA basketball is approaching closer and closer with every day, TV. I know that the news has been kind of whack. We haven't gotten too much in terms of free agency with everything winding down there. But NBA training camp, we're only about a month away, if not only a couple of weeks away at this point. So we should be getting live action soon. And the WNBA, TV, we are closing in on the playoffs. And who doesn't love the postseason?
No, I'm excited for the postseason. It just sucks that the WNBA is dealing with the amount of injuries that it's dealing with right now, which is absolutely tough. But hey, we're going to talk about in this episode, a contender is emerging once again, Jay. One of the contenders that we thought was dead in the water has come back to life. So we're going to be talking about that on today's episode. We're going to be, Jay talked about the NBA, man. It's kind of dead right now in terms of the news. The biggest news this week was that Jaylen Brown's father was arrested for attempted murder. So that's a state of the NBA right now, guys. And John Wall retired. Congratulations to John Wall, by the way. Just to start up the episode, congratulations to John Wall on retirement. Underrated player from our time, man. People are gonna forget prime John Wall back in our day. But yeah, great episode lineup for you guys. We're gonna talk about the WNBA, especially a contender that is reemerging. And Jay, the final position for the top 10 players in the league. We've done point guards, we've done shooting guards, small forwards, power forwards. We've gone to the centers, which means the top 10 players in the NBA is coming out next week, Jay. It's going to be a pretty damn good episode for today. I don't know if it's going to be as hard as it was for the power forwards because, man, that was tough. But the center position, there's been a renaissance, Jay, so there's going to be a lot of conversation about if this guy should be higher, this guy should be lower. We're going to get into that in today's episode. But, Jay, before we start this episode, we do have to plug our other platforms. Make sure you follow our individual socials at TV on Basketball, at The Ruchi Jumper. Those links can be found in the description down below. In terms of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, follow us on TikTok and Instagram for the best daily NBA content. That's where you get the clips. That's where you get the different series. That's where you'll get the daily picks or whatever we do for this upcoming season. You'll find it all over there. So we'll check out the YouTube shorts. We're starting to put some of the short form content over there as well. In terms of the YouTube, remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. That's where you're going to find the full-length episodes of the podcast, which we release every week. And Jay, we have been starting to put out the different segments of the podcast too. So if you can't, listen to the full episode in one sitting, we are starting to post the different segments of the show. If you want to take, just a bit more of taking a bit more medium-sized content. We got the short form, we got the long form. If you want to go right in the middle there, we're starting to post onto the YouTube, so make sure to check that out. Remember to like, share, and subscribe over there. And in terms of the podcast network, Spotify, Apple, remember to leave a review, subscribe, all that good stuff. We appreciate all of y'all's support. Jay, are you ready to get into this?
Yeah, man. Like you said earlier at the top of the episode, man, it's not like we got a ton to get into, but we got a lot of fun things to discuss, and that's always enjoyable.
That is definitely enjoyable. And of course, we're going to start off with the WNBA. And Jay, there are two things that have been the topic of conversation this week. One, like I mentioned, the amount of injuries. We like the Indiana Fever. Before we get to our main topic, the Indiana Fever is like a walking dead carcass right now, Jay. Every single week, it feels like a new player on their team is getting injured. The latest victim being Sophie Cunningham. Hopefully, she gets better soon. But man, just injuries throughout the WNBA. Absolutely horrible. We hope the best for the ladies over there, especially going into the CBA agreement. You want them to get paid. You want them to have, good standing within the season. So hopefully, the playoffs turn up, and hopefully these ladies get ready for that time. But Jay, another big topic from this week. The Las Vegas Aces are back, man. The Las Vegas Aces are back. And for the majority of the season, Jay, we've been very transparent about this when talking about the WNBA. They made the move for Jewel Lloyd, and it hasn't been the best to start off the season. They were, for the most part, Jay, hanging around the 500 mark.
Yeah.
But since July 27, we are, what? August 25th, almost a month since July 27th. And they've won 12 out of 13 games, Jay. They are back into the top 3 of the WNBA standings. We thought they were dead in the water. We thought, man, if they can't fix it like more past the All-Star break, there's no fixing this team. Well, it turns out, Jay, one big run and they're back in the mix. They are like 5 or 6 games behind the number 1 seed. I think they'll have that locked up, let's be completely honest. But, Jay, what has happened to the Aces out of nowhere? Out of seemingly nowhere, the Aces are back in the title mix. They even surpassed teams like the Phoenix Mercury. They surpassed teams like the New York Liberty, defending the WNBA champions. How did they become a top 3 seed already in just a 1 month span?
I mean, TV, this is how it goes, man. There's three things that are inevitable in life, man. Death, taxes, and Asia Wilson being an MVP. Like, it's just one
Right,
of those things where, like, she's going to always launch into MVP mode at some point in the season. And this is the Las Vegas Aces picking at the right time, right? This is one of those situations where the NBA has the same situation as well. The longer the season is, the more important the phrase game of runs becomes, right? And this season is the first extension of the WNBA jumping to a near 50-game season. And that's starting to show its head a little bit in terms of them finally being able to catch their stride at a point where, honestly, TV, let's remember, in a regular WNBA season, we would be staring at the playoffs like right now, instead of there still being like a few more weeks
In
left
terms
before
of
things
games, yes,
really get called.
in terms of
Yeah,
games played, yeah. In terms of
in
games
terms
played,
of games played, we will be staring at the playoffs right now. Instead, there's still about another week or two before we really have the full set for the bracket put together, right? So we're in a situation right now where the Las Vegas Aces have just been able to pick up steam at a really great time. You mentioned something that's also very important is talking about the injuries around the league. They're one of those teams that did not catch the injury bug. Minnesota
yes.
caught it. New York caught it. Indiana practically is the injury bug as far as we're concerned right now. You know
Phoenix
what I
had to
mean?
deal with it. Phoenix had to deal with some injuries as
Phoenix had
well.
to deal with a couple of things earlier on last month. Like, this Vegas team has been one of the healthiest teams through the back half of this WNBA season. And sometimes that's the most important thing about it, right? We say it in the NBA all the time. Sometimes it's better to be healthy than good, because just coming into the postseason good is enough to propel you in a real way. We've seen a handful of teams be successful simply by just being the last man standing, right? Indiana, the last 2 years, Atlanta with the Hawks when they did it in 2021. We've seen it in a handful of different iterations in the league. We're talking about the NBA, the WNBA now, especially with the season expanding longer, the war of attrition aspect of the WNBA is going to become a very new but very important aspect of not just team building, but also how you go about structuring your pacing within a regular season, how you play players, how you go about going 100% effort when it comes to certain possessions, when it goes to winning certain games. Don't get me wrong. I believe that seeding matters so much more in the WNBA because it's a more open platform
Yeah.
as opposed to East-West like the NBA is. So every game counts. Don't sleep and start
Yes.
thinking all of a sudden people are going to start load managing. But are you going to start making a lot more business decisions based around making sure that you can make it to the postseason healthy? Yes, I think that's going to become a much more important aspect of the WNBA as more teams emerge, and factoring in how long the season is starting to slowly but surely grow into, right? So the Vegas Aces being healthy and being one of the healthiest teams in the WNBA over the course of the last month and a half, paired with the fact that Asia Wilson just, I guess he saw Fee go down with that injury and said, okay, I got about a month to put myself back at the top of this list. Time to go cook. And I guess she decided she was going to go put together a whole buffet, because for the last month, she's easily been the best player in the WNBA. And for those people like me who think that Nafisa Collier is the WNBA MVP for this season, we're quaking a little bit. We're feeling a little nervous.
Jay, I'm not gonna lie, I was quaking a little bit because if he didn't come back last night, if
Yes.
he was out for a bit more of an extended period of time, I was gonna come into this episode saying, can Asia Wilson actually make up ground while Fee's gone? Because a big thing on the show, Jay, the best, it's the more, what have you done for me lately?
Yes.
And when you see Asia Wilson over this past month being that unanimous MVP that we saw last year, it's too hard to deny. It is
Yeah.
just too hard to deny. And it's not saying that Asia Wilson was doing bad prior to this run as well. Jay, I had stats from before the run. She was averaging 22 points per game,
Uh-huh.
2.5 blocks, 1.5 steals, on 47% from the field, 20% from three. Insane numbers, by the way, still. Nothing to take away from Asia Wilson. But this wasn't the 27-10 or the 27-12 from last year on insane efficiency, near Defensive Player of the Year caliber season that she had. It was still very good, though. But even when we talked about WNBA awards, we had her even like third behind Alyssa Thomas at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But Jay, during this 1 month stretch, this 13-game stretch that we've been talking about, 25 points per game, 12 rebounds, 51% from the field, 50% from three, two blocks, 1.5 steals. Jay, she is putting herself back into that neck and neck race with Nafisha Collier for the best player in the league. Luckily for Nafisha last night, though, she went 32-6 to remind us, hey guys, it's still MVP over here. So she's not trying to let that go, and I respect it. But with the Las Vegas Aces trending in the direction they are, we talked about this before the pod. We didn't know, like, we were trying to find like stats, we were trying to find patterns to see what has been kind of the biggest turnaround here. But Jay, they've in a lot of the categories, they've been middle of the pack. They have been, number 3 in like certain offensive statistics. But it wasn't like, man, this team is just significantly better than all these other teams. The point differential you mentioned was like plus 0.8. I mean, granted, during this 13-game stretch, the one loss they had was a 51-point loss to the Minnesota League. So the numbers just a little bit. I mean, just a little bit. But at the same time, the biggest thing you point to, and we have to just kind of accept the fact, is that when you have a top 1 player, a top 2 player in the league, and someone like A'ja Wilson who could just dominate on a night-to-night basis, you always have a chance.
Right.
You always have a chance. This was the case with LeBron back in the day, where you felt like you could put in any sort of supporting cast around him, and he'll take you as far as you can. It was the same case with a Steph Curry-led team. It was the same case with the all-time greats when we talk about the NBA. A'ja Wilson is in that sort of sphere here where it feels like no matter at what point in the season, all you have to do is get her to the playoffs, give them a chance, and when you have the best player in the league playing like the best player in the league, then you have a chance no matter what.
Yeah, facts. I mean, it's really one of those things where, like you said, you can do all the stat hunting you want to. This simply is an MVP caliber player playing like the best player in the WNBA over a stretch of a month when their team needed her to kick into a gear that would not only represent what they would be pushing towards the postseason, but re-represent them as a team that once upon a time won multiple championships back to back. We have to remember that this is a team that just not that long ago was at the top of the mountain and was a team that was considered, this was a team that was considered as the team to knock off the block. And the last year and a half has been a lot more sketchy when it comes to how people have viewed them. And it's made it where we wondered, TV, you mentioned that we talked about this before the pod. We really wondered if it weren't for this month, like, what kind of situation would they be sitting in right now? Because I think this would be a team that we would have went from having as a championship contender to like lucky to get out of the first round based off of the way the first handful of months went for this team. The last month has not only changed my perception of the Vegas Aces going into the postseason, but it's also changed my perception of what they are going to look like as a postseason performer. Because this is a team that's catching their stride at the right time, and there's only a handful of teams that I think are talented enough to withstand what kind of run the Aces are on right now, because the type of moves that the Aces have been on the last couple of weeks in terms of putting games together has positioned themselves now where the talent that's on their roster that we've always been cognizant of is starting to play up to what it's really worth and what it's really capable of. That starts with A'ja. Of course, that starts with A'ja, but the team as a whole is starting to catch its vibe, and that's a dangerous situation when you're looking at a squad that's battle tested, a proven former champion, and you have an MVP. Like that's a trifecta you don't want to see coming up down the pipeline when you're talking about postseason success or anything in terms of trying to win a championship if you're somebody on the other side of the court.
Yeah, and you got to remember, I mean, we talked about A'ja Wilson a bunch in the first part of this episode, but the talent is there. We've just been waiting for them to kick it into gear. Chelsea Gray has looked like one of the best passers in the league over the past month. So we have Jackie Young, who's having an underrated season, by the way. I feel like with the mess that the Aces had in early on the season, we haven't talked about how great Jackie Young has been. She was an all-star as well this year, so shout out to her for having a good year. But even someone like Jewel Lloyd, who, let's be honest, people have been criticizing her for having a slow start to the season after, having to fill some big shoes over there from Kelsey Plum, who herself is having a fantastic year with the LA Sparks. You talked about battle tested, Chelsea Gray, Jackie Young, A'ja Wilson, all part of those Aces teams which made it deep into the playoffs. Jewel Lloyd, a 2-time WNBA champion, as a member of the Seattle Storm. These girls know how to get it done, and this is what we're talking about. Like, just giving them a chance. As long as you have this group of talent who have been battle tested for years on end, put them together, put them with one of the best players in the league. Even though the Minnesota Lynx have been probably the most dominant team from start to finish so far in the WNBA, you can't sleep on this Las Vegas Aces team. And this whole month has been a wake up reminder to the rest of the league. Yeah, you thought we were dead and gone. We are going to be back up here. And not only are we going to be going on this crazy run, we might have multiple rounds of home court advantage, which is going to be massive, especially knowing how rowdy that Aces crowd is.
Yeah, I think a good point that you make, and I think it's one that's just very important going into the postseason because we are very close, is again, outside of Minnesota, who front to back has been the most consistent team in the league. It kind of sounds like we're talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder in a funny way, right? Unlike them, no other team has really set a precedent for themselves going into the postseason, right? I think every other team has a very significant question mark. I mean, we just saw Jessica Shepard get the fastest triple-double ever for Minnesota a couple
Yeah,
days ago, right? And
yeah,
again, we bring up the Dejounte Carrington trade that happened at the trade deadline. We talked about that last episode, right?
yeah.
This team, start to finish, whether it's having an MVP caliber player, high-level three-point shooting, top-level defense, high level depth, solid move at the deadline to further build up their roster. Like this team has done everything right throughout the regular season, and the only thing that's hurt them is the fee injury. And even then, they've been successful in her absence,
Yeah, no,
right?
I mean, they've gone 10-3 in her, and in this past month, even though the Aces won 12-1, the Minnesota Lynx have not missed a step, even with
They
like
have
the
not
team missing
lost a
like six
beat.
games. Yeah,
Yeah, they have not lost a beat for 1 second, despite the fact that they've lost an MVP caliber player and a player that could actually mess around and win MVP this year. So that team is the only one that's truly rooted themselves this year. That means a team like the Aces, who's catching fire at this time, has the chance to be like the game wrecker of the postseason. Because while everybody's discombobulated, they're the team that seems to be starting to catch themselves in a way where they're starting to cement themselves in place. They're starting to root themselves into a certain identity. And it's all back behind an MVP caliber player in Asia who, in any given series, could take over and win you 3 games. And that's all you need.
she could be the best player in any series, even against the one Felicia Collier. This is how dominant Asia Wilson can be. So the resurgence of the Aces, the taking it to the next level from Asia Wilson is definitely a storyline to look after, especially with the amount of injuries like we mentioned off the top around the WNBA. If this Aces team could stay healthy, it could be more than anything a war of attrition, like you mentioned. So
Yeah.
that's something to be interested in. But I feel like what you said earlier is going to transition nicely into what I'm going to ask here, because you said it feels like besides the Minnesota Lynx, there's no one who really has like their stamp as, the number 2 in the WNBA. It feels like the Lynx are number 1, 2 to whatever you want to say is like kind of in a jumble. There's going to be weeks, some ebbs and flows of like some of these teams where you could say, this team is the second best team. This team is the second best team. Jay, I'm going to give you some teams here in the playoff mix, and you have to tell me if this team is part of this WNBA Finals bubble. Do you see a path to them for winning a championship, or you think, or you're just not fully convinced yet? So it's just basically a yes or no. We're gonna
Okay.
try and go through it. So, firstly, obviously the Minnesota Lynx. They're WNBA Finals. They're in the
Definitely.
bubble. They're 100%. There's no need to talk about that.
Yeah.
The Las Vegas Aces. I feel like we've talked ad nausea for it. You have the best player in the league. You have the talent in that starting 5. They're going to be in the mix. 100%. The Atlanta Dream. In terms of consistency, in terms of health, at least compared to some of these other teams in the playoff race, they've been relatively healthy, even though Ryan Howard has missed like 10 or so games this year. They've been relatively healthy, at least.
And I think that's the most important thing, right? Is going to be Ryan, because Ryan, her contribution alongside Alicia Gray has been so important for the revitalization of this team this year, right?
Yes.
And Ryan as a high level 3-point shooter this year, as a player that kind of was known coming out of Kentucky as a player that can kind of get to the rim at will. Her expanding to the 3-point line at a much more efficient rate earlier on this year was such a big, like an important leap in her skill development for this team in particular. And I think when you think about what she adds to this team as a secondary shot creator next to Alicia Gray, who's a very good setup point guard just as much as she is a scorer, this Atlanta Dream team, to me, I think that they are very well coached, play a good brand of basketball that I think will translate to the postseason. My question for them is really just going to be whether or not they get hit by a talent gap discrepancy. Right? Think
It's
about some of the
recent,
other teams that
yeah,
we tend to
yeah,
name:
yeah.
Minnesota, Las Vegas, New
New
York,
York,
Phoenix. Those 4 teams are going to be the main ones that come up. And you got to think to yourself, don't get me wrong, Atlanta, they're a good squad when you think about what they had from a depth perspective. Brittany Griner, Brianna Jones. Obviously, we already talked about Ryan Howard and Alicia Gray. Like, let's not sleep and act like they're not talented. But you do have to ask yourself, from a depth perspective, those other 4 teams kind of set the precedent for what the calling of having like a stacked deck looks like in the WNBA. Atlanta is somewhere right at like 5 or 6 on that power ranking. And we're talking about strictly going like talent for talent, bar for bar with some of these other teams. So
yeah,
that's the biggest question I have, is that and Alicia Gray being the number 1 on the big stage, because we haven't seen it yet with Atlanta. We haven't
yeah.
seen it.
No, 100%. I feel like the Atlanta Dream, at least the starting 5. I'm not to say that they match up with the Aces or the Lynx or the Liberty. I feel like those 3 are kind of you can even in a sense put the Mercury in there, especially because
Yeah,
they have all like multiple All Stars, MVP caliber players. I feel like the starting 5 can match up with a few of them, but obviously besides like Nas Hillman coming off the bench, there's some question marks. They have Tahina Paopao, who's been an excellent rookie, by the way.
yes,
Excellent
good
rookie
3-point
this
shooter this
season.
year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fantastic 3-point shooter. I'm glad that I was able to translate from college. But some depth concerns over there, Jay, potentially. I
Yeah.
don't know, especially like when you see, like you mentioned, the length trade for Dejanay Carrington. When you see Emma Mieseman just randomly sign with the with the New York Liberty. I don't think you're gonna have that pull. What if all the teams are healthy, depth wise, Atlanta might be hard for them to compete. But
Yeah.
they've been for the most part, especially now, consistently healthy. So I feel like it's comfortable. We could still put them like in the bubble, especially when it comes to
Yeah.
staying consistent throughout the year in terms of being healthy. So I feel, especially with Alicia Gray playing at all WNBA level player, I think we can both agree they're in title contention.
Yeah, I think Atlanta's definitely on the bubble. I agree. But like I said
Yeah,
beforehand,
yeah,
I think the biggest question is
yeah,
just
for sure.
where in that power ranking do we put them when we talk about championship equity? I think
Yeah, no, for sure.
if we're ranking them amongst the entire WNBA from just what they've done, what have you done for me lately? Like what
Yeah.
we were having
Oh,
the
yeah. No, for
conversation a
sure.
second
Yeah,
ago,
yeah, yeah.
they're easily top 2, top 3 in that conversation. I
But when
think
it
once
comes
we
to
start having a convo about the postseason,
it's gonna be
you
interesting.
just
Yeah,
have to ask yourself, like Alicia Gray is going to be so important to that. The rim protection of Brianna Jones and Brittany Griner is going to be really important to that as well, because obviously you're going to have to go through a gauntlet of bigs to be able to get
yeah,
to the championship game, no matter who it is that you face. So that's going to be its own issue. But I think the Alicia Gray, Ryan Howard element of it is so important, and more particularly Alicia Gray. I'm going to kind of like beat the dead horse on this one. She has had such an all around strong all-star season. She's been an all-star the last 2 years with
she's going to
Atlanta.
be the All WNBA this year for sure.
Yes, but this has easily been the most complete season, I think, start to finish from a productivity standpoint, as the number 1 that Gray has had in her entire career. And I think that she has the chance to step into that echelon where we have those conversations with her, the way we talked about Jewel Lloyd, the way we talk about Kelsey Plum and some of these other players. We talk about Sabrina at the guard position. I feel like Alicia's in that convo, but not spoken for as loudly. I think this postseason is going to
A
be
deep
very
playoff run
important to
will help
setting
that
that.
a ton.
Yes, I think a
Deep
deep
playoff.
playoff run. We've seen this before, TV. I hate that we have to make so many NBA
Yeah, it helps the
comparisons,
understanding, bro. That
but
it helps with the
yeah, it
understanding.
helps us, but it also helps our audience, for those
Yeah,
that are into the NBA that are trying to learn about the WNBA. Think about how many players we've had a different outlook on after a postseason run, right? Tyrese Halliburton was considered overrated
yeah.
before this past postseason.
Devin
Now,
Booker. Yeah,
now Devin Booker's the opposite in the spectrum. He
yeah.
was a guy who was considered underrated. They
Okay.
made it
Yeah,
to the post. They made it to the postseason. Were consistently getting better, and even made the NBA Finals. Of where, of course, they fell to the Milwaukee Bucks that year. They've been middle of the pack, if not worse, the last couple of years with the Kevin Durant stuff
yeah,
and everything going on with that. And now Devin Booker went from being the number 1 shooting guard in most people's rankings to maybe third, maybe
yeah,
fourth, right? He's always in somebody's top 5 unless you just completely soured on him.
yeah.
But he went from being the number 1 guy at the position to maybe the best he is on people's list is 3. And although that might not sound like a big drop off, when you're considered the best at your spot, that also means you're an automatic All NBA candidate. When you
Yeah,
drop down to 3rd, you might barely make the top 15. It depends on the circumstances when you look at that. And I think the same could be said for the WNBA. I think Alicia has always been in like the top 5 to top 7 conversation at the guard position over the last 3 years. But I think a strong postseason run this year in particular puts her into a conversation where we're having her in that top 2, top 3 in ways that we didn't have her before.
100%. Jay, let's move on to the next team though, the New York Liberty. I know the injuries. we talk about injuries compared to besides the Indiana Fever. This team has been hit with a ton. So
yeah,
luckily tonight, as of recording, Sabrina's back and Brianna's back. So that's big. Are they in the WNBA Finals bubble the former defending champions?
I mean, if this team is healthy, TV, come on,
they have to. They have to be.
Let's be. Look, first of all, also, and you mentioned it casually in passing because we talked about it on the pod before, but like, just being able to calmly bring in Emma Miesemann like off the dust pile is like insane work still. Like
averaging 14 points since coming over, and then
insane.
Just to pick her up just like that, like.
And the funny part about it is, like, you look at the Dejanay Carrington trade from Minnesota, and you're like, this team just can't seem to fail, huh? But then you see New York, and they're like, okay, don't think we're just gonna go out sweet. Don't think that last year was just gonna be us getting away with murder in Game 5, and then all of a sudden we're just gonna fall back. We're competent with our situation, and whatever happens. No. We're going bar for bar with y'all. And I would make the argument that even though Dejanay is a big time signing, when you look at also her, I said this on the podcast last time, but she also has a rapport with Courtney Williams and Natisha Heidemann that are already on that team because of back when they played with the Connecticut Sun. There's a big deal in acquiring a player like that because her skill set matches what they need as a 3-point shooter and a perimeter defender, and then her rapport with players on that team already makes it where it's a seamless transition. But New York just got better. They just, like, from a talent perspective, like getting Emma Miesemann was just a more talented acquisition than getting Dejanay Carrington. Dejanay Carrington is what we call a good fit move. Emma Miesemann is what you call elevating your roster. 2 totally different things. And the fact that she was able to just get dusted off the scrap heap, brought back onto the roster, averaging double figures out the gate, and already is a high-level rebounder out the gate as well as a part of a team that's always been kind of decent as a rebounding squad. Like, let's be real, dude. That team is going to be in the mix.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Especially if you have your top... Jay, they probably have the best top 3 in the league. I think that's like that goes without question. Having Sabrina, Brianna, and John Quell, all potential top 7, top 8 players in the W, which is insane. Having like as your big 3, and then you obviously have Natasha Cloud, who's been up and down this season, but she's definitely had some very good moments. And a deep bench who knows how to play together. Jay, you gotta remember this team just knows how to play with each other. So as long as they're healthy, and I trust that going into the postseason, I think this Liberty team should be fine. I think we're both in agreement that they're still gonna be in that title mix.
No, facts.
100%.
I think they're in there.
Yeah, next team though, the Phoenix Mercury.
I think they're in it, but I think the biggest thing for them is just they've got to get it together. Like, this team's got to get it together. I need to see them be more effective on offense. We know that they're a high-level defensive team, but I just need to see more from them offensively. I think that Satu, although she's been kind of steady with her numbers, I haven't seen too many takeover games from Satu. I think the Dewana Bonner thing also has made things kind of interesting because although she fits what they want to do, I do feel if you watch them play, there's a weird semblance of like hero ball, my turn, your turn stuff going on with that team where it feels like they don't really have a set structure. Alyssa Thomas has kind of always been the table setter, the floor general type. And it feels like that team is almost so talented that they're like trying to figure out how to feed all parties involved. And they've been solid. Don't get me wrong. Everybody's averaging what they should be given their talent structure, right? But I just wonder if this team is going to run into a talent issue when they get into the postseason of like, who is supposed to be that leader?
Have a figure cohesion.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
I just wonder. You'd wonder. They're playing good, but you have to ask yourself, like, where is that all? They're the one team that when you look at all the talent discrepancy stuff, like I was mentioning beforehand, about like where those talent gaps are, you can make the argument,
I feel like they're talented enough. It's just like the feel as a team together is just like a bit more of a question mark to me. Especially,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, like,
TV, you can make the argument they have more talent than anybody in the league if we're going bar for bar. I mean, obviously you Fee's an MVP, Asia Wilson's an MVP, Breonna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu. Like,
yeah,
don't get me wrong, there are still levels to this. But if we're going full starting five, breakdown talent for talent, like, you could make the argument, and we even had the conversation at the beginning of the season, you could make the argument for this team to be the most talented starting five in the NBA, in the WNBA. You can make that argument,
mm-hmm.
especially with them adding DeWanna Bonner in the mix. So it's like, to me, it really, like you said, the cohesion aspect in a postseason setting is going to be so important. Now, they are veteran heavy. That's something that you can say about them
Oh,
that's very different from, like, Atlanta, for example. Very veteran heavy. So I think
they're going to
being
be the
able to
Connecticut
get
Son of
themselves
last year.
together,
Yeah,
yes,
they're
I
going to
think
be
being able to
looking
get
good.
themselves together, get their mind right. They're the Connecticut Son of last year, but they're more talented than that team. And that's
Yeah,
what makes it
I
where
like
you
that.
think that
Yeah,
they are a team
yeah,
that can either flame out in the first round, or they're a team that's going to make a run that everybody should have seen coming and didn't call. It's going to be one of the
yeah.
two.
Yeah, no, it's definitely gonna be interesting because again, you said talent for talent. They are a very good basketball team, and we haven't even talked about Kalia Cooper, who again didn't start the season playing, but is in the lineup and is going to be a big part and playing heavy minutes when it comes to the playoffs. Catherine Rustball has had a pretty good year as well, starting a lot of games when there was a lot of question marks about the starting lineup. So they have a deep
Mm-hmm.
team. It's just like how it's all going to come together. Again, that like we mentioned, it's going to be something to look out for. But this Phoenix Mercury team, if we're talking talent for talent, they're definitely in the mix. These two final teams though, are going to be interesting. The Seattle Storm, they started off pretty strong, but they've kind of fallen off a little bit here, Jay.
Another one of those teams that I feel like once the postseason hits, all their players are going to kind of click back to where they need to be at. I think the Brittany Sykes thing is going to
Yeah,
be a very underrated signing that clicks a little bit more importantly in the postseason. This team is going to be strong defensively. I think that's the one thing I feel really confident about. I think they can score the basketball pretty well. I wonder whether or not this team, whether or not their guard play is just going to be able to carry. That's going to be so important because when you listen to a lot of the other teams that we've been describing over the course of, like, these rankings, a lot of teams that rely on their front court to dominate, right? And a lot of teams
yeah,
that have very good perimeter defenders that can guard multiple positions across the positional spectrum. This team is a very small ball run and gun, play with tempo type of squad. You know what I'm saying? And so
yeah,
you have to ask yourself, and it's funny, again, if you want to make the NBA comparison, we said this a lot about, like, the Indiana Pacers, for example, of, like, would that run and gun, high octane offense play style click in the postseason where the game tends to slow down, the physicality goes up, so on and so forth. You do wonder if Seattle is in a similar pocket of, like, yes, it does. We're not going to stop playing it this way, and we're going to catch a lot of you guys lacking because you think that you can't keep up with it in a way that you actually are more than capable. So I think Seattle is the sleeper team for me in this whole thing. They're the team that, if their play style and that whole guard centric lineup setup that they got going works out in their favor, they're going to be a team that's scary to catch in a one game elimination situation, and definitely in any full blown series. But I just wonder.
yeah. Honestly, more than anything, I do like the defensive team, like you mentioned. Gabby Williams has been awesome. Obviously, they
Mm-hmm.
have such a very good defensive anchor in Ezzy Magabor. Sorry, did I pronounce it right?
Magabor, I think it
Yeah,
is.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. Like when I look at a lot of the loss they had this year, it is more to deal with them having to like guard. I mean, I think there's a big reason why they brought in Brittany Sykes. They need some help defensively on the perimeter, but defending these guards is going to be a big thing for them. And we talk about an older team, Jay. This team is definitely on the older side as well. Yes, they do have some young talent over there, but a lot of their top players are definitely on the older side. So the defense is going to be good. They're going to play that run and gun offense. I don't think they're going to be in that WNBA Finals bubble. I think they might be just on the outside. But this is a team that you definitely can't sleep on. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
like it's not going to be like one of those like bottom like playoff teams like we've seen like in like the NBA and WNBA years past where it's like, okay, there's going to be like an easy out. They're not going to be an easy out. So definitely you have to take a look out for them. But at the same time, there's definitely a talent discrepancy, and there's definitely just teamwork and just like a team discrepancy in general between them and the top of the league. The final
Yeah.
team I did want to say here, Dave, though, and we talk about this team being the most injured team, but they still have some talented players that they've been playing around. The Indiana Fever. How do you feel about them?
It's just not clicking, bro. It's just not clicking right now. I think they're good enough when they're healthy, but I think they're just going down a snowball effect of stuff that's just not going to lead to strong postseason success. Shout out to what they've been able to do this year with what they've had to deal with, but I just don't. I can't see it right now with everything going the way they are. I mean, they're one. I can't even say they're one more injury away from fully derailing. This is a team that is in a really, really bad spot right now. And I just don't see there being any realistic way for them to be dangerous in the postseason being so banged up like they are.
Yes, Sid Colson, Sophie Cunningham, Ari McDonald, Caitlin Clark. These are rotational pieces, key rotational pieces at that to this
Yeah.
team. All gone in the blink of an eye. We talked about how great Ari McDonald has been to start off this year. We talked about how much of a big contributor Sophie Cunningham is, especially being labeled as the enforcer of this team over the past couple months. Caitlin Clark, we already enough. Nothing has to be said about how talented and how much she brings to that team. And shout out to Kelsey Mitchell, shout out to Aaliyah Boston for really holding it down, because we talked about how I had in the midway point the coach of the Fever winning coach of the year. It's because she was able to keep this whole thing together with the amount of stuff that's been going on with the injuries in and out of the lineup and all these season injuries. But like you mentioned, everything is just kind of falling apart underneath them, which is at a tough point. And I'm glad, Kelsey Mitchell is proving people wrong. People thought that she was overrated last year, and benefiting a lot off the Caitlin Clark situation. Well, she's averaging 21 points per game, and Caitlin Clark has not been there for more than half the season. So Kelsey Mitchell is that girl, man. She's awesome. And Aaliyah
Facts.
Boston has been awesome. But at the same time, you just can't, like, with the amount of injuries and the amount of depth they lost, even if Caitlin does come back, I think that's a different conversation for another time. I don't even know if Caitlin should be coming back at this point, just to risk the long-term ramifications of what that could mean, because it's the amount of time she's been in and out of the lineup due to that calf injury. But I can't say that they're a title contender. If everything was healthy as it is, you could definitely put them up there, especially with the way Caitlin's playing earlier on in the season. But as of right now, you can't just trust any of that. So I have to say that they're outside of that bubble.
Yeah, I agree. They're just in a weird spot right now. When healthy, this team seems like one that would be able to at least make some noise. And Caitlin's a talented enough player that in a series, like, you trust that there could be some real
Their
distance there.
offense would be
But
so good. Their offense would be
yeah,
so good if everyone is healthy. But unfortunately, that's not the case. By the way, just quick thing before we move on, should they try to bring back Caitlin Clark, or do you think it's like time for just kind of just shut her down and just kind of move on to next year?
I think chalk it up. I think it's one of those things where you have to look at the distance between you and everybody else when it comes to the talent right now. And I think that trying to force Caitlin to come back in under the circumstances that they're in is going to be really forcing the issue of, like, making her have to go all out to even carry this team properly into a good situation. And I just don't know if that's the right way to play this.
Yeah, and it's
Um,
and it's
yeah,
also, they don't have like that big of a gap between them and the teams that are missing the playoffs. I mean, them and the Valkyries are the same record. The Sparks, we talked about for the last like a couple weeks ago, how they're trending in the right direction and they're getting healthy at the right time. So
yeah,
there's teams right there. So even if you do quote unquote shut things down, it's not going to be too much like of a fall off, to be honest. So hopefully things get healthy for them next year, because they are a very, very talented team. But
yeah,
this season has been way too unlucky, unfortunately, for them. We were super excited for them coming into this year, especially with the moves they made in the offseason. It's just, we've seen teams like this, just high potential teams that we expect to go far, just get completely derailed by injuries. And unfortunately, in the W this year, it was the Indiana Fever. So hopefully they're back for next year. But hey, look, if Caitlin wants to play, Caitlin wants to play. We of course want to see her back on the floor, but it might be time to kind of like chalk it up and kind of move on to next season. So it's
it's a
definitely going
good
to be
draft class coming, TV. It's a good draft class coming.
it's a good draft class and a pretty damn deep one as well. Let us know
Yeah.
down below what you guys think. Your thoughts on the Las Vegas Aces situation. Your Your thoughts on who do you think that do you agree with who we have in our WNBA finals bubble? Is there any teams that we're missing? Thoughts on the teams like a team like the LA Sparks or the Gals Golden State Valkyries if they start to get within that picture? Let us know your thoughts down below. Jay, it's time for the final position. Top 10 NBA centers. It took us a while to get here, but we've got here to the top 10 NBA centers. How did you feel about making this list? We were stressing last week when it came to the power forwards. This one I don't think we're as stressful, but there's a variety of names on this list where I wouldn't be surprised if you have them in, but like I have I have a decent list of honorable mentions, but you can definitely make the argument that some guys should be higher, should be lower. So I'm interested to see what you have.
I'm gonna be honest, TV. I wasn't really sweating this one too much. My overall philosophy was that you have to take into account what the center position is asked to do nowadays, right? I
Yeah.
think that trying to focus too much on what the skill discrepancy is between
Okay.
players is kind of a tougher thing to do with the center spot versus like power forward, for example. Like I believe that power forward is such an important position in basketball nowadays because there's real positional versatility. Your power forward could be your small ball center. Your power forward could also sometimes slide to the 3, depending on what their size is. Your power forward can be a stretch big, but your power forward can also be a slasher. Your power forward could be a 3-point shooter that spaces the floor, or they could be a player that can take the defense off the dribble and drive. Like the power forward position in today's league is so important because it's kind of like, even though it might not be team's most talented position, it's kind of it's the position that you tend to build your roster strengths and weaknesses around, right? You get a rim running center if you have a 3-point spacing power forward. You get a floor spacing center if you have a power forward who's primarily a shot blocker, right? If you have a power forward who handles the ball a lot, like Giannis Antetokounmpo, you need high level perimeter 3-point shooters that don't handle the rock nearly as much, but can shoot at a high clip because he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. But that creates other opportunities for others, but they have to be able to knock down those shots at a high enough rate, right? So the power forward decision decides so much. The center position, you kind of have one of two versions of guys. You either have the defensive heavy guy or the offensive heavy guy. And the guys who fit the middle of that tend to be in the middle of these type of rankings. They tend to not be at the tippity top, but they tend to be somewhere in the middle, depending on how elite one or the other is, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it goes to the situation where, like, once you get past the top 3 or 4,
Yeah.
it's kind of just
What
based
you
off what you
value.
like. Yeah,
Yeah.
what you like and what you value. I think that's so different from like point guard and small forward, more particularly, where there's a little bit more of like they do something that needs to open up their team in a way where without this guy on the roster, they don't function the same way. Versus with a center position, outside of maybe 4 or 5 guys, TV, you kind of can flip some of these guys out regardless of who they are. The name may change, but the productivity is the same depending on what the team is.
It's going to be
You know what I
interesting to
mean?
have how we have on this list. Like you mentioned, there's at least now. I'm glad at where the center position is now because Jay, if you remember 10 years ago, oh boy, the center position was kind of in a tough situation. We've had not to diss DeAndre Jordan or that, but he was a All NBA first team guy at some point, and now the center's in a bit more of a renaissance right now. We have them doing a lot more than they have done in the past, so it's gonna be interesting. Again, like Jay mentioned, it's about what you value and what skill sets you value at the position and how much that helps the team. So Jay, quickly before we get into the top 10, some honorable mentions. Who did you have here that just missed your cut?
So I only had 3 that I felt like passionate about in terms of like leaving them off the list because I felt like they could have been added to the top 10, but I just couldn't find the full blown argument for them. The first one, Kristaps Porzingis. Injury concerns with Kristaps Porzingis for me, paired with the fact that he's a guy that I feel like even his peak is still like a borderline all-star. So even his peak level is not like so dominant that I'm like, okay, I can put him in the top 10 because when he is on the floor, this guy is just unbelievable. He's not that kind of player. Not anymore. Nikola Vucevic, as much as I love my Chicago Bulls guys, He's a guy that I had to keep out of this top 10. He's talented enough. Last year, shooting 40% on about 5 to 6 3-point attempts per game was a huge step for him because that's going to be something that keeps him in the league, right? He's one of those back to the basket bigs that kind of like the NBA left a little bit, right? Brook Lopez was the first like blueprint of the player that went from being a dominant post player to stepping out and shooting beyond the arc and then prolonging their career. Hopefully Nikola Vucevic got the memo and starts to kind of follow a similar route. He's going to be a high commodity on the trade block this upcoming season if he can continue to shoot the three ball like he did last year.
Yeah.
And then the last guy I just barely left off was Jared Allen. And I wanted to include him on this list, but I feel like if we're talking about rim runners, shot blockers, like he's probably at the top of that list. He's definitely above your Daniel Gaffords. He's above who's some other, I don't want to like be super disrespectful, but like he's above
Derek Lively.
Derek Lively. Like there's those guys that I feel like you just know, like for that kind of play style, Jared Allen is definitely the best of those guys. He's better than a Yucca Kongwu, like that group. But is he so good at that he's a top 10 center in the league? I don't know now. I think with the way the center position has progressed over the last 2 years in particular, I don't know if Jared Allen's a top 10 center with being kind of just I say this casually, but 15 and 12 rim defender, can't really run offense through him very much, doesn't stretch the floor in any real way, does a lot of his stuff as either back to the basket or cleanup duty around the rim. He's
I know what you mean. Yeah,
Jared Allen is a top 10 center in today's NBA. Is like our conversations around Clint Capella with the Houston Rockets when he was in that conversation. Jared Allen is kind of in that mold now as that rim running center that can do everything you need him to do, but only does it to a level that gives you a ceiling that's not as high as some of these other guys we're probably going to talk about today.
No, 100%. All right, I mean, you talked about a couple guys that I had up here, Jared Allen being one of the guys just missing off the list. And I just had a couple other guys here that I want to shout out who I wouldn't mind if you have him at number 10 or over here, if you make the right argument. One of them being, I have a feeling you might have him on your list. Rudy Gobert is not on mine.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Which is going to be, he was like actually the first guy off.
Okay.
For me, off this list, I will say that. And then just a couple of guys who I think very valuable skill sets. And like the one guy I have here is Isaiah Hartenstein. I feel like he has such a valuable skill set in the league. Obviously, you need to have a certain like team around him, but he's so good at what he does that I feel like that needs to at least have some sort of, some credit be given to him. So I'm going to put iHeart over there.
Yeah.
I think Jalen Duren is like close to getting that next step. If he just takes another jump in his productivity, he might be entering these conversations. But again, that takes another jump. He took one last year. He needs to take another one this year. And the only reason I want to bring up this guy is because I saw someone's list and he had him at number 20, and I thought it was completely disrespectful. Jakob Poeltl's a top 15 center in this league. I just want to just say that.
I think that's fair.
I've seen two lists where they had him at 20 and 21, and I just said, yeah, that's just really disrespectful.
His pay price is what's killing him in the eyes of many people. Him getting paid $20 million a year is making people view him in a much more disrespectful light than what he actually is. I agree.
But Jay, I'm gonna be completely upfront with you. He deserves more than that. His passing ability is underrated. His defensive ability is underrated. One of the best garbage men out there, and he has an underrated post game.
He's been equally as productive as guys like Nikola Vucevic, Kristaps Porzingis, Nicholas Claxton, and he's in that same price point as those guys. Yeah, and he's been healthier and he's been more consistent.
He's more efficient, and he's been more efficient.
That is fair.
I just want to just say he's like a top 15 center in the league. I'm not saying he's a top 10, but I just wanted to put it out there.
Fair.
Jay, we're gonna go into our top 10 to 6 though, as we do, and then we're gonna go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 individually.
Okay.
Who do you have in your 10 to 6?
So at number 10, I have Miles Turner.
Okay.
At number 9, this is where I slotted Rudy Gobert. I did slide him down, but I put him at 9. At number 8, I have Alperen Sengun. At number 7, I have Domantas Sabonis. And rounding out my group, I have Ivica Zubac right there at 6.
Okay. It's just similar names. Names. At number 10, we both have Miles Turner. We both have at number 10. At number 9, this is where I have Kristaps Porzingis.
Okay, so that's probably our biggest
swap.
Our biggest discrepancy is that.
Yeah, so I have Kristaps Porzingis at number 9. At number 8, I have Alperen Sengun.
Okay, same.
At number 7, I have Ivica Zubac. And at number 6,
Interesting.
I have Bam Adebayo.
Oh, Bam's here.
Bam is here.
Interesting. Shout out Domas. He survived this round, it sounds. Maybe that's
yeah,
our biggest discrepancy, it seems. Okay.
yeah,
All right.
yeah. But yeah, no, just sell me on Rudy Gobert. That's the one thing I want to like. I want to see here. I know he's still one of the best defensive centers in the league. I know that he missed quite a few games last year, but describe to me like why you think he still belongs in this top 10 list.
So the reasoning for me is because at the end of the day, the Minnesota Timberwolves are able to operate the way they have over the last 2 to 3 seasons defensively, built off of his backing. Yes, this team has had guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They've had Jaden McDaniels. Obviously, Anthony Edwards has improved as a defender. But this team, anchored by his rim defense, talking about Rudy Gobert, has been allowed to be aggressive defensively in a way that this roster has not been able to do in years past, back when Karl Anthony Towns was a center. We've also seen the impact of Karl Anthony Towns as your lead center defensively with the New York Knicks. TV, we both agree it's not great. It's not great. While the Minnesota Timberwolves, without Karl Anthony Towns, simply swapping him out for players like Nas Reed and that same positioning at the 4 next to Rudy Gobert, did not lose a beat defensively in terms of what they were able to do in terms of forcing turnovers, being able to create hard opportunities at the rim, shot blocking wise. Obviously, they were still always at the top of the NBA. This is a guy who, yes, you could put him in the bucket with Jared Allen as a rim running center, only gets stuff done around the basket, can't do a whole lot with his back to the basket, needs a lot of setup in terms of being a guy that can be effective offensively. Totally agree with you there. But where I think he's very different from a guy like Jared Allen is defensively as an anchor, and we've said this even dating back to Utah. You can build a defensive infrastructure around Rudy Gobert where, as long as you have at least one more high level perimeter defender, you can be an effective defensive team because he forces teams to be so cognizant of him being around the rim and forcing people to want to uh make certain decisions around the paint that you allow your team to just, even bad defenders, to be more aggressive defenders on the perimeter because of what he does as a shot blocker and a rim defender. So Rudy Gobert's defense carries this so much for me. I feel like, TV, this is also going to be a very cliche statement, but I just don't believe that a guy who finishes top 3 to top 5 in DPOY every single year isn't a top 10 player at his own position. Especially when you're DPOY at a position that's most valuable for that kind of award. That award has always been highly favored for the center position. You are constantly in conversations as a DPOY candidate, and you play the most impactful / most important defensive position in the NBA. I don't see how you can be one of the most impactful defenders in the league at the most impactful defensive position and not be at least a top 10 player at your own position. I just don't believe that's possible.
No, I feel you. I feel you. I'm not taking away anything from him defensively, even though maybe it's not like the same Rudy Gobert from like 2 years ago or something like that. Obviously, the injury did hurt him this year, but it's the what I've like learned and seeing these teams like go further and further into the postseason is the defensive capability is so important. Yes, at the setup position, but with a lot of these centers, when you look at especially these recent crops of NBA champions or teams that go on late runs, they can't just be super one dimensional. And I feel like with Rudy Gobert at that point, yes, he's the first guy off because I understand how valuable that is defensively,
Mm.
but being a liability to the point where you can potentially, I mean, there was like one game we can say that against the Lakers where he actually took advantage of those small man matchups. I think he had like a third. I think in the closeout game was a Jay. He had like a 28 and 15 sort of game, like in that LA Lakers series. But the offensive deficiencies, especially when you go late into the playoffs, is something I'm going to dock Rudy Gobert here. And when you look at these like previous champions, when you look at teams like the OKC Thunder, you look at of the Pacers of this year, you have good defensive anchors at the center position, especially when you go deep into the playoffs. But they also need to give you something on the offensive end where they're just not completely a liability. You can trust them. And Miles Turner did this a lot when it came to later rounds in the playoffs, where he actually played big. He didn't just go and play from the outside. He did not just space the floor. He gave you a bit more versatility on the offensive end, and that's what I kind of put him slightly over Rudy Gobert. Obviously, not the same defensive impact. I'm not going to be comparing that, even though he's a good defender. But the offensive capabilities and what you need from a center now, especially if you want to go deep into playoffs, you need to have a little bit more of that offensive game. And I feel Rudy Gobert, that just continues to decline, unfortunately. But I have him just outside my top 10.
I have nothing, like I said, I have nothing wrong with you leaving him off necessarily because at the end of the day, I have him at 9. That goes to show you that I only value that DPOY concept, but so much because yes, he's maybe considered as a top 3 or top 5 defender in all of the league. But how valuable is that if you are considered a potential net negative offensively? That weighed so much that I did have to knock him down a couple of spots. So I understand you being like borderline having him at like 11, 12 versus having him in your top 10. I personally just didn't feel comfortable leaving him
Yes.
off the top 10
Yeah.
when you're talking about what he does bring to the table. Because again, for today's league, with the positional versatility where your 4-man can be a small ball 5 and not necessarily be a rim protector, but be a guy who just adds more like shooting capability to your offensive lineup. This rim protecting big man has become both the most important player on the floor in certain iterations and the most liable player on the and the biggest liability, I should say, on the floor in other situations. It depends, right? Once
Yeah.
upon a time, we saw the small ball lineup of the LA Clippers completely pick on Rudy Gobert because
Yeah.
the rim running the rim running center / shot blocking type could not keep up with all the slashers that were operating in space that were mainly operating as downhill guys and mid range shooters, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the other end of the spectrum, the Los Angeles Lakers play a very downhill, get to the rim kind of style when it comes to trying to generate offense. And Rudy Gobert was able to dominate as a defensive anchor in that series against the Lakers. It's all about matchup
Yeah.
continuity at that point. And in that situation, against the right team, Rudy Gobert is still one of the best centers in the league. In
Yes.
other situations, he can get played off the floor. So that's why I had to
It's a
put him at
give
the
and take. It's definitely a
base.
give and take.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had to put him at the base of the top 10, but it's kind of, like I said, a little scary
Yeah.
for me personally to take a DPOY out of top 10, but I can understand why you came from it. My question, and I guess it's going to kind of lead into the next part of us having this conversation, though, is that's not more valuable than what Kristaps Porzingis brings to the table?
Kristaps Porzingis. This is okay. The funny thing is, I was gonna talk about this because you had him off and I had him on. I know you mentioned him not being able to stay on the court. 57 games when they won the championship with the Boston Celtics, 42 this past season. But I feel like with Kristaps Porzingis, you're not going to get obviously the same defensive impact as a Rudy Gobert. Still a very good shot blocker, mind you. He did it very well next to Al Horford in that championship run. But where Kristaps Porzingis, I feel, can be like really effective in this run with the Atlanta Hawks is that his versatility of playing both the 4 and the 5, being that even though he's not, New York Kristaps Porzingis, even when you look at the Washington Wizards when he was averaging like 23 points per game, he's not going to be that guy. He's still someone's going to give you 50% from the field. He's still going to be a 40% three-point shooter. And when you mix that and you have the rim protection that Kristaps Porzingis brings, even though maybe the rebounding has a lot to be desired, when you have that good all-around game and you're able to protect the paint and still have that sort of impact where, offensive players, when they go inside, have to think twice when you're around. And especially with a lineup like with the Atlanta Hawks, and I love the addition of him because you can now use him in different scenarios. You can play him next to a Jalen Johnson. You have the versatility where you can play him at times at the 4 in certain playoff matchups with Onyeka Okongwu. He's shown that when he's on the Boston Celtics that he could play kind of both roles. And even though he's not that strictly defensive anchor like a Rudy Gobert is, he makes up for it for being one of the best three-point shooting bigs in the league. And he's still, even with less minutes as a member of the Celtics, and I still think he's going to play maybe under 30 minutes per game as a member of the Atlanta Hawks, he still has that offensive output, averaging 20 points a game, still being a 40% three-point shooter, and still being able to get to the rim at a pretty good pace and using his size. He has that better all-around game, which I value more. Plus, he still has that shot blocking ability, which still hasn't left him. I know his athleticism is not what it once was, but he still has that. He still makes defenders think twice when attacking the paint when he's around.
I just think we haven't seen Kristaps Porzingis play valuable basketball in some time. I
Yeah,
really
like
wonder about that.
one whole year though. Like it's like I understand. But I mean, like he was still like he was playing till that very end of that Celtics run back in 2024.
But TV, it's not even just the Celtics run. This past year in particular has showed us that we don't even really know what the upside health wise of him is moving forward. And again, this is maybe the biggest discrepancy between him and Embiid, who will probably come up a little bit later. But it's like, again, I said this
Yeah,
at the top. I think I mentioned this at the beginning. Is like there's a difference between the health issue holding you back when you're like a middle of the pack or bottom portion of the top 10 kind of guy versus when we know like your peak is like an MVP caliber guy, which kind of like
yeah,
says that even though we know this injury situation could be a real constituent to us having to bump you down the list if we had this conversation during the season. If we're doing everybody healthy, what does it look like? But factoring in that we know you have an injury history, the peak of powers version of Kristaps Porzingis and Embiid are obviously two totally different conversations. I wonder with Kristaps Porzingis, let's have this conversation. Is Kristaps Porzingis the second or third best player on Atlanta right now?
at the moment, you can make the argument for three. I think at his peak, you could say up to two. I think you can at his
Do
peak.
you think he's closer to being the third best player on that team than he is to the second, or closer to being a fourth best player on Atlanta?
The way they're gonna play him, and especially, I think this is why they were willing to take the risk because they have Onyeka Okongwu on that team.
Mm-hmm.
He's I'm not gonna say he's gonna be situational, but there's gonna be times where he does start, where he doesn't. That's why I think he's gonna play under 30 minutes a game. But he's shown that even like with the less minutes, he's still very effective. I think he'll be closer to like I think he'll very comfortably at like throughout the season be the third best player on that team.
I think the way I look at it, and even in the way you answered it with talking about things like minutes per game, the insurance quality of Onyeka Okongwu, I think the indefiniteness of Kristaps Porzingis compared to the definite aspect of knowing exactly what you're getting from Rudy Gobert was the biggest discrepancy for me. I think that's the biggest thing for me is you know exactly what you're getting from Rudy Gobert every single season. And it starts with a top 5 defense. And TV, I'm not the greatest mathematician, but we know something is historically accurate from a championship caliber team. If you have a if you have a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense, you have a high likelihood of being able to win the championship. And Minnesota with Rudy Gobert has basically locked themselves into being a top 7 to top 5 defense every single season that he's been there, right?
Yeah,
So that alone kills half the equation. And then it simply comes down to guys like Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle to help uplift them offensively to then be also a top 10 offense to be that caliber of a squad. Kristaps Porzingis, on the other hand, very much an enigma where you have to ask yourself, the peak version of him can really uplift your team. But the other end of that pendulum is a guy who might play less than half the season and doesn't impact your roster nearly as effectively as you thought. I think that question mark just mattered a lot more to me, but I
I feel
understand.
you.
I
I
understand.
feel
I
you.
feel what you're saying. I
I
feel
feel.
you. I
I
feel
don't. No,
you.
no, no. I feel you. I feel you too. Besides that, I mean, we both have Miles Turner up there. Bam Adebayo is outside of my top five. I will say quickly on Bam Adebayo because we're not going to talk like you're going to be doing more talking about him like later on.
Mm,
Um, I feel like the offensive drop off from like last year kind of like disappointed me with someone like Bam Adebayo. He's always going to be a top like defender for me, but I've always like waited for him to take that next jump offensively, and I've come to the realization with him is that he's just not going to be like that next level sort of offensive guy that we want him to jump into, top three center discussions like we've had in the past. But his
yeah.
defense is going to continuously be there. I'm interested to see if they're going to play him and Khalil Ware next to each other a lot of times because I feel like that can really open things up for
Mm.
the Miami Heat later on. But I just have him just outside my top five. If you put him at number five instead of my number five, like that was gonna be my biggest thing with this list, 5 and 6 being interchangeable. But for me, I put him like just outside of the top five.
I think the biggest thing for me, TV, is he still averaged 18 and 12 last year. And more importantly, you could see him trying to explore the studio space more as a mid-range jump shooter last year. And I agree with you. We were both pretty down on Bam Adebayo as an offensive hub last year. I think Bam has proven that he can't be the number one offensive option on the team. I think we agree on that at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But as a guy who is a high level shot blocker, definitely can guard 1 through 5 in space. Definitely can rely on that. I believe you can.
Is he really I agree with you with the defensive versatility, but I don't think he's a high end shot blocker. He's not
Okay,
really.
maybe not a high-end shot blocker, but I think he's a good free safety rim defender. If you go
Yeah.
back to, let's say they run double big, but we're still calling Bam Adebayo a traditional center, right? If they run double big next to Khalil Ware, I see him as a good secondary slide guy behind Khalil Ware, where even if Khalil Ware gets the first initial contest, I believe Bam Adebayo is the best second slide guy at the center position as a guy who might not be a true rim defender, but he's a great free roamer, kind of Draymond Green-esque, but being able to do it at a much bigger position,
Yeah.
right? So I
Yeah.
look at it maybe more so that way. You pair that with the positional versatility of being able to guard 1 through 5. Because again, I think he has the lateral quickness enough to
Yeah.
guard in space
Yeah.
much better than guys like Rudy Gobert, for example, which is why
Yes,
I'm a lot
100%.
higher on him. I think Bam's a much better guy in terms of being able to run offense through instead of Rudy Gobert, and I think that he can guard in space much better than Rudy Gobert can. So, as a high-level defender, as a guy who can guard up and down the positional spectrum, and a guy who I still think, unlike Rudy Gobert, can be your second best offensive player, maybe your third in the best case scenario. He's
Mhm.
probably your third best offensive player
Yeah.
in the best setting for himself. But I think he's still good enough to be like your Robin offensively in most situations, right? I think that he's a guy that I think the big question mark for me more than anything is going to be, is the experimentation with the mid-range shooting going to help him? Because if he does not improve as a mid-range shooter while still taking a higher volume of them, he slowly but surely deteriorates his offensive impact. Because he's one of the better finishers at the center position in the league, right? As a lob
Mhm.
threat, as a slasher, those kind of things, even with the ball in
Yeah.
his hands as a driver. But
Yeah.
if he's going to be taking those mid-range shots and be taking it at 4 and 5 attempts per game from a
He needs to be
mid-range
hitting them.
position where he
Yeah, he
forces
needs
those
to be
bigs to
hitting them.
come
Yeah.
out, he has to be hitting them. That's going to be the biggest thing. And maybe this is me banking on him taking that next step. I believe he hit 43% from the mid-range area. Yeah,
Yeah.
43.6% from the mid-range area, around 10 to 16 feet. 44% from 16 and beyond. That was actually the best of his career. So, a guy who is slowly but surely starting to get a little bit better despite stepping further and further away from the basket. TV, the question with him, too, with him stepping further away from the basket is we just have to pray that this isn't a Serge Ibaka thing, right?
Yeah.
Elite level defender, but as he gets further and further away from the basket offensively, he becomes less and less effective. That's going to be the scary part, too. But I think
Yeah.
Bam's got the status to be able to I think he's got the static to be able to be a high-level mid-range shooter. Not DeMar DeRozan or nothing crazy like
Yeah.
that, right? Obviously. But for a center, I think 45 to 47% from the mid-range area is really good for him. And I think he's not stepping out to the three-point line where he's completely uncomfortable. I'm cool with it.
Okay. No, I feel you. I feel you. But Jay, we're gonna move on to our top 5 now, which is gonna be
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
because I feel like we have like, I mean, besides one name, I think we have basically the same names. It just depends on the order.
Mm.
Jay, who do you have at your number 5? You say your number 5. I'll say my number 5.
So my number 5, this is where Karl-Anthony Towns is.
This is where I have Demontis Sabonis.
Okay. I mean, I had Sabonis at 7, so this
Okay.
is
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is one of those.
Yeah, don't worry. This is what I was saying. Like Sabonis 5, Adebayo. That was gonna be like my like. I was flipping back and forth which one is which.
Mm.
So I guess I'll start here because you were talking about Bam, but Demontis Sabonis. I feel that I know we were gonna look at the defense, and I understand, and I know we were gonna look at the Kings, and I understand, but I'm not gonna let the Kings' incompetency to just continuously putting guys around Demontis Sabonis that just doesn't fit the team at all take away from the fact of how talented of an offensive player he is. The defense definitely needs some help. I think if he had like a situation like with a Nikola Jokic with like an Aaron Gordon next to him, or he's just some sort of athleticism, Jay. We're asking for athleticism around Demontis Sabonis. We're asking for some guys that can just kind of move around the court. Jay, Demontis Sabonis over this past year, 19 points a game, 14 rebounds, 6 assists, 59% from the field, one of the most efficient scorers in the league, one of the better offensive hubs. This guy, the year prior, was averaging 8 assists per game. He is a extremely good offensive player, and yes, he doesn't have the athleticism, but I feel that the way that the Kings have built themselves has just showcased more of the faults of Domantas Sabonis than people are willing to give him credit for, like, how good he is on the offensive end. A very good mid-range jumper, one of the best post games in the league, has one of the best visions. He is. I'm not going to compare him to Nikola Jokic because Nikola Jokic just can have takeover game potential. There's just no. Domantas Sabonis cannot do that. But the fact that the Kings thought the solution with having Domantas Sabonis at the center position was to add Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and have Malik Monk at the positions, and not building more, defensive reliable options, some slashers, some guys that can feed off the type of assist that Domantas Sabonis can give you, is for me a crime. I feel he's still one of the best offensive bigs in the league, and people are going to look at the defense, and 100%, I 100% agree with that. That's why I have guys over, like the guys over him. That's why I value the guys above him's defense more than him. But I'm not gonna say that he's not one of the best offensive hubs in the league in terms of the big man position.
So this is where our discrepancy is really interesting, because you left Rudy Gobert off of your list, and I actually put him on mine. You
Yeah,
uplift Domantas Sabonis. In this sense, I technically dinged him. And I think
yeah,
the interesting part about this is, the reason why I say that is because it's so important to kind of factor in Rudy Gobert being a defensive hub and how much that does or does not matter, versus Domantas Sabonis being an offensive hub and how much that does or does not matter. And I think that's where it gets kind of interesting, because how much does your starting center need to be the hub of your offense as much as they need to be the hub of your defense? Again, I think this is why I elevated Rudy Gobert, is because I
yeah,
think the impact of his position makes it where he's so important to what, for example, what Minnesota does, that I had to elevate him for being a defensive hub, versus I actually gave Domantas Sabonis a bit of a demerit here, because him being an offensive hub is really his only calling card, in my personal opinion. He's a
yeah,
high level rebounder, yes, but a lot of it is just kind of empty calorie stat stuff for me. He's been doing this since Indiana. He is a high level passer. He is a guy you can run offense through, and he's a guy that when the Sacramento Kings were going on their crazy like the beam run, I was saying he was part of the culture turnaround, and I still agree with that. But you have to look at what Domantas Sabonis has brought to the table, both with Indiana and with Sacramento, and ask yourself, like, is he really a floor raiser at all? Like, I don't necessarily know of him being your number one offensive option as a hub, similar to like Nikola Jokic, like you mentioned before. He's as high level of a passer as anybody at the center position, probably a top
yeah,
12, top 15 passer in all of the NBA. So he's a guy that can facilitate. He's a guy who could create opportunities for himself and others. But how much of a ceiling does that really have? How much of a floor does that really have? We haven't seen a ton of team success, especially in the postseason, of Domantas Sabonis being your number one guy offensively, versus, again, for example, with Rudy Gobert, we've seen this guy get past the first round, past the second round as the defensive hub at a valuable position. Domantas Sabonis being your quote unquote best offensive player, or the player that you run everything through, hasn't necessarily done anything besides, at best, get you a first round playoff exit. And that's in the best case scenarios of what Domantas Sabonis has had. I won't make it seem like he's had the greatest supporting cast of all time. I completely agree with you on that one, in terms of having more athletic players around him, in terms of shot blocking, or having guys who can pass, cut, dribble, shoot, the whole shebang. I agree with you completely. If this Domantas Sabonis was on the Oklahoma City Thunder, or if this Domantas Sabonis was on a team like even an interesting squad like how the Chicago Bulls play up and down tempo. Granted, I don't think he would floor raise them too much because the talent
yeah.
discrepancy is so weird. But like a more fast-paced team, right? They could be a really interesting squad. I think that's why they tried to go after somebody like Zach LaVine when they traded for him from Chicago. But I just wonder, bro, like, we know what he is offensively, and it's really great, but it doesn't do much for his team's success, though.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. I I know there's not much of a ceiling, and I think um with this current King squad right now, it's not going to get much better. Again, I told you
Uh-uh.
this is probably like the weirdest cast that he's ever had yet going into this
Agree. I
going
agree
into
with
like
that, and I'll give him brownie points for that because this is not the most
yeah
optimized roster. I will give you that.
yeah, and I don't know. I just feel like when looking at the Domantas Sabonis game, I feel it's more for me like he's kind of like the like he is a major bright spot and a on a team where there's a lot of dysfunctionality. There's a lot of like in and out pieces which people have. They can't, I feel like it's just not that like hard to figure out with the Sabonis to try and like hide like certain things. But again, it's the Kings. Like we can't really like ask them to do like to think like and like build like a better team around him. But I know what you mean though. Like his like the playoff counting stats has not been great. He hasn't had like a great playoff run. But I do think that throughout the regular season, and I think if you have him as a hub and maybe like a more optimized cast around him, he could be a number one or two guy, like a number two guy, especially on a middle of the road playoff team. And he just gives you more, like he just gives you like more options, like for the rest of the
Mm.
guy, like for the rest of the guys, in terms of being able to not just like pass, like you mentioned, like being a top 15 passer in the league, but he also is like a very good inside the box scorer. And I know, and he's still one of the best rebounders in the league, both offensive and defensively.
Mm. I
Yeah,
guess the other reason why I asked that too is because you have a bigger discrepancy than I do between him and somebody who's tends to be in conversations associated with him a lot, which is Alperen Sengun. I had those guys back to back at 7 and 8. You have a bit of a gap between those guys. Is it the rebounding? Is it the passing that makes it where there's such a big gap between those guys? Because those guys get comped a lot. They're very
yes,
similar.
yes. It's a bit of it's a bit of like just like the overall skill set of Shengun is just like slightly lower. I know I like for me, I think who do I have in between them? I have Adebayo and Zubac. I think I just like I see like Sabonis as like a much higher offensive threat than you, and I understand like that doesn't like result to like wins or maybe like playoff success, but I do think he's
Mm.
still like one of the like I value his like offense like a lot more like in this situation, and I think same with my number four, where it's
That's fair.
they have like really like high offensive ceilings.
Yeah, I mean that's fair.
Yeah,
I mean that's fair. You could also make the argument that Alperen Sengun is unproven still. You can still say that too, because from in
yeah,
terms of a longevity perspective of being a guy that you could run offense through, we still only saw it in spurts. Remember, one of the best runs for the Houston Rockets in recent memory actually involved Alperen Sengun being injured. So
yeah,
you can say it from both sides of the coin. This will be an interesting year without Jalen Green and a more uh pliable fit in a guy like Kevin Durant on the roster of how effective Alperen Sengun is going to be. If there was any year for Alperen Sengun to have like a real breakout season as a top 5 center in the league, this would probably be the biggest turning point of it. Because outside of Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun is kind of like definitively the Rockets' best offensive lead option in terms of running offense through. Like definitively now. Beforehand, you were trying to figure out who's the lead man, Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun. I think we know that KD is going to get his touches. That's kind of thrown in,
yeah,
but he's a guy that's so he's so malleable in terms of like being able to fit him within any kind of offensive structure that you don't necessarily have to run offense for KD. So this
yeah,
is going to be the first year where I think we really start to see Ime Udoka run real offense through Alperen Sengun and how that not only builds his game, but also elevates the Houston Rockets. So I understand the discrepancy to a certain extent. I just thought it was interesting because again, those guys get comped so much
yeah,
that there's actually debates as to whether or not Alperen Sengun is better than Domas. I still think that Alperen is a smidget, a hair behind him. I'm right there
yeah,
with you. I think he's still a smidget behind because we haven't seen him as the lead guy. We've seen Domas be the lead guy in a handful of different situations. Um, but I think that's the biggest thing. Somebody who's not going
yeah.
to come up in this half because we both have kind of discussed him a little bit. If Ivica Zubac damn near made my top 5 after this past
He's
season,
up
let me
there.
just throw that out
He's up
there.
there.
He
Yeah,
he damn near made my top 5, and I'm going to be honest. If I wasn't paying respect to a certain individual who I think we both know I'm talking about, Ivica Zubac probably would have been in my top 5 after what last season was.
yeah,
He's still a
for
guy that
sure.
you can't really run offense necessarily through, but he's a guy who you can draw up 7 to 8 plays a night, and he's going to get you 14, 15, 16 rebounds, 16 points. He's going to get you 10 to 12 rebounds a night. He's a guy who can be a high-level shot blocker. People were not talking about him as a DPOY candidate enough last year, but he had a TV went to bat for Ivica Zubac last year as a DPOY candidate
Yeah.
towards the back half of the year because he was a guy who was really holding things down defensively and was a big part of why the Clippers were a high-level defense despite not necessarily having the personnel that said they should have been last season. And I totally agreed with him. I agree with him now. Ivica Zubac, if he's going to continue to be a top 5 DPOY candidate, average double figures, average double-digit rebounds, and be a guy who can be who you can run offense through a handful of plays per game and get him actively involved, knowing that he's already a high-level rebounder, so that's going to create easy opportunities by itself. If you can run 6, 7, 8 plays a game for him, he also averaged 4 to 6 points off of just lob threats and cleanup duty around the basket. This is a guy who could be a 20 and 10 guy. He can be a 20 and 10 guy even with Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, and Bradley Beal on the roster next year. I really think he's capable of that. He barely missed my top 5, but I mean, boy, he was close. It was close.
He's close, no, 100%. I feel like my numbers 8 to 7. Even I said maybe besides like number 8 to 5, very much you can like move stuff around. There's like it's definitely like not like a for sure spot. Like I don't think there's like a much of a gap between those guys. Again, it's just more where you valuable 100%. But yeah, Vika Zubac, he moved up high on our list. I don't think he was even in discussion of our list last year. So the jumps that he made, this is just a credit to him to how much he's improved on honestly both ends of the ball. Best season of his career by far. Jay, who do you have at number 4?
So at number 4, this is where I had Bam Adebayo at. This is where I sat Bam.
Okay, this is where I have Karl-Anthony Towns.
Okay. Well, obviously I just had Karl-Anthony Towns at 5, so it's probably time to talk about him a little bit.
Yeah. I'll talk about Karl-Anthony Towns. Amazing 3-point shooter. I feel like this year we finally got reminded that he could be a dominant offensive player, especially like forced towards the basket, having that elite 3-point shot. The defense has a lot to be desired. I feel like he was still getting picked on at times. He's definitely improved probably since his days pre-Rudy Gobert. I feel like he's still improved on the defensive end, but he's someone that we've seen like the farther you go deeper into the playoffs, the more he's going to get picked on. So that's why hopefully in those moments, Richard Robinson's healthy and he can actually provide him some good minutes next to Karl-Anthony Towns eventually. But one of the best go-to offensive bigs in the league, mixing in with the 3-point shooting, the 3-level scoring. He just brings such an offensive skills, like a unique offensive skill set that the Knicks just sorely needed, like getting like more variety in that offense, especially from that big man position. I mean, Julius Randle, we talked about in the past, he was just much of a ball stopper. He was someone who was getting open 3-point opportunities, but it was always like, is it going to be 1 year he's going to be a good 3-point shooter, another year he's not? You got that consistency now in Karl-Anthony Towns, and the offensive consistency has been so big for the next team. It's just all about trying to figure out how you can optimize the defense around him. That probably means adding another second big next to him. But he's just so much on the offensive floor, that, like so much of a good offensive player, that you have to have him on the court of all times because he just gives so much. And you've seen in games, even against the Indiana Pacers, where Jalen Brunson doesn't have it going, Karl-Anthony Towns could just win you a game in that fourth quarter, and he's proven that and even in like deep playoff runs. So Karl-Anthony Towns, I have him higher above Sabonis for sure.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me between Cat and Sabonis is Cat can do more offensively, I think, in terms of operating as a perimeter threat because he can shoot the 3-ball at a high clip and take guys off the dribble a lot better as a driver.
Yeah.
I think he is still a high-level passer, nowhere close to Domas, I think, but he still is a high-level passer. The fouling TV blows me in the playoffs. You know how I feel about this. The fouling with Karl-Anthony Towns kills
and the
me.
offensive fouls too.
Yeah, definitely both sides of the floor. Kills me. But I will say, he's a guy that, at least with the Knicks, was able to elevate himself in the postseason in a way we hadn't seen in the past. I think these last 2 years, between that last season with Minnesota and his first year with the New York Knicks last year, it started to change my perception around him as a postseason performer a little bit. Not a ton, but a little bit. Enough to be like, okay, wait a minute. This guy is starting to catch the memo of like, yo, you need to be available. You need to be aggressive, but you need to understand that you're very valuable to your team's offense, right? And I think the other biggest difference between the two is that it goes back to what you said before about having to place another center next to him. I think you do understand definitively what kind of archetype you need to put next to Karl-Anthony Towns in order for him to be most effective on offense and or defense. I think you know that. Unfortunately for Domantas Sabonis, I don't think we know. Because there's not too many Aaron
Yeah,
Gordon, Miles Bridges types growing on trees in the league, right? That
yeah,
small ball four that can shoot the three, can be a high level rim defender, can still be a guy who can like run up and go, finish alley oop opportunities. There's not too many guys that are like that. And we saw him next to a traditional
fair,
shot blocking
fair.
center who could space the floor in Miles Turner. And it didn't really work. It wasn't that much better than what he's been able to do with Sacramento without a floor spacing big. So
Yeah,
no floor spacing big, a rebounding big. Like he played next to slash in front of Jonas Valanciunas last season. Didn't really matter that much. You know what I
yeah,
mean? He
yeah.
played next to DeMar DeRozan and Keegan Murray, who both played the four despite being undersized. Didn't really matter that much. Like, no matter what the circumstance, again, go back to the Miles Turner stuff with Indiana. Didn't really matter too much in terms of what their ceiling was, even what their floor is. At least with Karl Anthony Towns, rim running center, shot blocker. You put him at the 5 or you put him at the 4 and he plays the 5 defensively, you know what you're going to be able to get out of Karl Anthony Towns on
Yeah,
both sides of the floor with that kind of effective guy. Domantas Sabonis, not as easy of a puzzle piece to fit in. And another reason why I dinged him was because you almost have to build the offense around Domas. You almost have to.
okay.
And because he has such a low floor, it makes it a little bit harder versus Karl Anthony Towns. He's not as malleable offensively as KD. Let's not get ridiculous. But I think
No,
his offensive skill set is pliable enough for you to, if you just put him on a team next to a good enough rim running big, he can be effective. Versus Domas, we don't really even know what the true building structure around him is. So I think that's why Karl Anthony Towns being above Domas on both of our lists is actually good, regardless of what our gap is.
yeah. No, I'm just looking at my list. You know what, Jay? I'm gonna do a little bit of a thing. I'm gonna move
Okay,
Bam to the 5. I'm moving Bam to the 5 and Domas to the 6. I'll just do that.
okay,
I'm gonna do that.
okay.
I'm just gonna do that. But yeah, that's cool. Quantity Towns at the 4. I know you talked about Bam Adebayo a lot when I mentioned him at my number 6. So I know you have him at the 4. Defense is a big thing. Hopefully, again, we both talked about it. Hopefully the offense, it can be a bit more consistent, especially with that mid-range jumper. We don't need him to stretch it out to 3-point line as much as people want to say, but the mid-range jumper needs to be a bit more consistent for sure. Jay, who do you have
Yeah.
at number 3?
Number 3, this is where Joel Embiid is.
Okay, I have a feeling the top 3 is going to be the same here. I have Joel Embiid at number
Yeah.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Joel
I
Embiid's
mean, like,
here, and this is paying respects. That's
this
all
is
it
paying
is.
respects. We know that he is arguably the best two-way player in the league when he's healthy. But Jay, there's levels to when he's healthy. And Joel Embiid over these past 2 seasons, he's only played 57 games. And that's including the playoffs. It's not been great for good old Joel Embiid. And even the last time we saw him on the court, it wasn't great. You could tell that the reoccurring knee injuries has been hurting him over these years. He hasn't been obviously him being on the sidelines has been kind of the norm ever since his rookie year. He missed his first 2 years in general. But the thing is, we've seen peak Joel Embiid. We know how good he is on the offensive and defensive end. He is an MVP caliber talent. But just like we say with Zion Williamson, just like we say with some of these other guys, you need to be on the court to showcase that. And Joel Embiid, over these past years especially, I feel like we had a good sample size where he's, no matter what you think about him and how his peak is going to be, Jay, we can't trust him to play even 60 games a year, let alone hoping to reach that 65 game limit to be eligible for awards. Jay, we could be lucky if he can play 50. If he can play 50, I feel like that's a good baseline. And if we want to talk about the best players in the league, we can't be saying that 50 games is your baseline. I'm sorry.
No, I agree with you. This is paying respects. This goes back to the Kristaps Porzingis argument I made earlier. This guy is an MVP when he's healthy. He's a permanent MVP right now when we do it as the case of him being a guy who only averages like 40 to 50 games a year. And he's a guy that's an auto all-NBA player if he plays 65 games healthy. Like, that's the peak version of him. So we're paying respects by putting him at 3. I'm not going to lie to you though, TV. I wasn't as harsh with Zion Williamson, and maybe it's just because he's younger. This is my last year with the Joel Embiid shit, though. And I'm being aggressive about this because I put him so high, despite how I value availability. I value availability a lot in terms of my rankings, and I've tried to be very fair about that throughout my rankings, including Zion Williamson, who I put at the bottom of my top 10, where most people would say win healthy. If we're doing the win healthy game, we're putting him much, much higher than that. And I put him at the bottom of my top 10 because I value health that much. Me putting Joel Embiid at number 3, despite his injury concerns, I can only do that for one more year. This is a guy who is not going to crack the top 5 next season if he does not at least become all NBA eligible by the end of the 2025-2026 season. If he does not play 65 games this upcoming season, he will not be in my top 5 next year. And that's because this guy is running out of time. His contract is too much. His offensive and defensive ability is going to continue to deteriorate as he continues to become more and more injury prone. And he's a guy who's going to start to slowly but surely make that one MVP look a lot more Mickey Mouse than it already did at the time. Because a lot of people already questioned the validity of him winning that MVP next to Jokic, who was on on his road to a three-peat that season, right? If he cannot play 65 games again, that is going to be, 3 years removed from that MVP season?
3 years, yeah. 3 years removed.
I'm sorry. It comes a point where we have to be. We're not even having this conversation as aggressively about Kawhi Leonard, and he has load management on his side.
Yeah.
In terms of what he does from a productivity standpoint on the floor, because Joel Embiid, even with load management, is not making 65 game threshold. Kawhi Leonard is at least in that ballpark, if not beyond that ballpark, when his injury management is going smooth.
Yeah.
So this is the most aggressive case of I need to see 65 games of you. We talked about this with Zion last episode. I need to see 65 games of you, or you are not making my top 5 next year, despite the MVP on your resume. Period.
The only thing I'll say before we move on to number 2, if he doesn't reach 65 games, I just need a playoff run. Give me a playoff run, Joel Embiid. If you give me a playoff run, if you can at least give me a playoff run from start to finish where you're healthy, then I'll give you some respect. But even still, we talked about being available for the playoffs. He hasn't been able to do that over the past few years. He hasn't been able to do that, Jay, probably since the year where Kawhi hit the shot on them, in terms of like a back and forth playoff run. Probably not. So, I mean, that's where we are with Joel Embiid, and we kind of have to accept it. We're giving him respect at number 3, but it can be a quick drop off from here now, Jay. We're still holding on to that MVP level season. We're still holding on to it.
Yeah.
Jay, at number 2, who do you got?
It's Victor. I mean, he's there.
Victor Wembanyama. Yeah, he's there.
This is going to be a guy that starts to run away with DPOY very soon. He didn't win it this past season, but I think he's going to be a guy that slowly but surely is going to get into the DPOY conversation where it's like it's his award to win. And I mean, it's his award to lose. And even last year, that kind of was the conversation before he went down with injury.
He lost the award.
That conversation was already starting of like, this guy's the DPOY and it's his award to lose. And he basically didn't play enough games to really qualify for it, right? Exactly. And there was a certain aspect of what have you done for me lately? Evan Mobley still very deserving of said DPOY award. I also think that if Victor Wembanyama played at least 65 games, we wouldn't be having that conversation about him as a DPOY as well. Let's be real. He would have been runner-up, I think, still clearly. But I think at the same time, if we're being honest, like this is a guy that's going to slowly but surely start running away with DPOY. He's a dude who I think has not nearly explored the studio space as a rim runner as much as he should for a dude who's over 7 foot. A lot of the perimeter play experimentation has been nice. Now you have a ton of guards. You have De'Aaron Fox, you have Stephon Castle, and you have Harper as well, right? Yeah. I think we're at a point now where Victor, yes, can still be a guy who takes 5, 6, 7 3-point attempts per game, but like, yo, get your butt down near the basket, bro. It's time to start getting effective.
He needs to be dominant there. Yeah, we've seen since like halfway through his rookie season, 24-12 guy, best defender in the league, best rim protector in the league. He has everything. He has the complete package there. As Jokic continues to, like, once Jokic gets to that age and he starts to go down, I don't know how much his fall is going to be. We know how his longevity could be really good especially for the play style that he has. But Wemby's going to continue to go up, and as long as he's healthy, he's going to make the Spurs even more a viable playoff contender as well. He has the skills to do so. We just need to see him on the floor, and hopefully this is the first year we get a playoff run with Victor Wembanyama. We know how good he is on both sides of the floor. We just need to see it on a higher scale now. We see the skill set. We just need to see it on another level. Great offense, great defense, amazing defense at that. So we just need to see it now in a playoff setting. And Jay, last but not least, at number 1, Nikola Jokic.
Safely.
We're definitely gonna talk about more about him next week when we do top 10 players. Nikola Jokic, quick thoughts on him. I feel like we talk about him like every 2 or 3 episodes of how good he is. Even just throughout the season, he does something new every time, and we're like, yeah, that's just what he does. And again,
I think that's
exactly.
No, I agree with you. I mean, that's basically what it is. He's a guy that we're going to continue to talk about on a real level as the best player in the NBA. He's either the number 1 player in the NBA or he's top 2, and it's not really a conversation after that tier break, right? And this is a guy who he takes what we said about Alperen Sengun. He takes what we said about Domas. He takes what we say about Karl Anthony Towns. He takes that offensive hub aspect and just like puts absolute steroids into it. Like, he takes everything that they're able to do as highly effective offensive players, and despite being a below average defender for his position, he is so important as an offensive hub and so effective at being an offensive hub that your floor with him is so much higher than with some of these other guys because he can single-handedly walk you into wins.
He can single-handedly walk you into the second round.
Facts.
Yeah. I've never seen a guy who just brings up the rest of his teammates so highly, in our lifetime. It's so rare. Like, you see the LeBrons do it, you can see the Steph Currys do it, but you're not gonna do it. You're not gonna see it with Nikola Jokic, where he directly not only gets people involved 1 through 9, but he gets people paid. He makes them look so much better than they actually are.
True. Let's talk about the bread too, TV. Let's talk about this bread too. Most valuable player also involves helping the homies. That's true.
That's what he does,
That's
bro.
true.
Yeah, he turned Aaron Gordon into one of the most valuable role players in the league. Michael Porter Jr., for someone who has become one of the best off-ball 3-point shooters. Jamal Murray has been able to play at such a high level off of him. Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, all these guys left the Nuggets to go to other teams, get paid, and they weren't the same guy. And you know what people like Bruce Brown do? They come back. And they come back because this is where it's going to be. And he's still, even though we say that he likes feeding others, Jay, he's still a 30-point per game scorer. Still one of the best rebounders in the league. And you could say he's a below average defender. I think he's an average defender. I think he's slightly underrated in that aspect. I think he's just average, maybe slightly above average, but that's just really pushing it. But he's just so good all around. And you're not going to see anyone who elevates his teammates like he does in the NBA. I don't think it's close to that. I don't think it's close to it.
I mean, that's really what it gets down to. That's really what it comes down to, man. I mean, easily one of the most effective offensive players in the league. The biggest discrepancy between him and some of these other guys that we talked about that are offensive-centric only is just that he's just too damn good at it compared to these guys. Like, these other guys that are in this mode, they are effective offensive players, high-level offensive players, all-star caliber offensive players. You're just not an MVP, bro. You're dang sure not a multi-time MVP getting this done where you're walking your team into 45, 50-plus wins on a consistent basis where your number 2 has never made an all-star game before.
No, 100%. And we talk about how important defense is with all these guys. We completely nullify that for someone like Nikola Jokic.
Facts. I mean, true. It's just true. Call it Glaze if you want to, but it's just a different level. It's just a different level.
No, it's literally a different level. That's the best way you can put it. He's just he just does this at a different level, and there's no comparison in NBA history to someone like him. This is how much of an effective offensive player he is. That's why he's at our number 1. Jay, before we move on to the final part of the outro of the show, list me your 10 to 1 for the top 10 centers.
All right, so for my top 10 centers list, I started with Miles Turner at number 10, Rudy Gobert at number 9, Alperen Sengun at 8, Domantas Sabonis at 7, Ivica Zubac at 6, Karl Anthony Towns at 5, Bam Adebayo at the 4, and then to round out the top 3, Joel Embiid at 3, Victor Wembanyama at 2, and Nikola Jokic at the top at 1.
Awesome. For myself, Miles Turner at number 10, Porzingis at number 9, Sengun at number 8, 7, Ivica Zubac at number 6, Domantas Sabonis, changed from number 5. Number 5, Bam Adebayo, 4, Karl Anthony Towns, Joel Embiid at number 3, 2, Wemby, 1, Nikola Jokic. Damn good list of, if I do say so myself. Let us know down below what you guys think. Agree or disagree? Is there anyone that we didn't even mention that you think should have been on this list? That we didn't even mention the honorable mentions? Let us know down below. And Jay, next week, top 10 players.
Mm-hmm.
Going to be a different. We're talking about all elite players here, so it's going to be definitely interesting to see who we have in our top 10, who we don't. But that episode's going to come out next week. But Jay, it's another end to a fantastic episode. Thank you guys for watching. What do you have to tell these beautiful people before we sign out?
Man, I'm looking forward to the top 10 episode. We also have a very special other kind of, evergreen topic type episode, something different. We haven't had too many guests on the podcast, so look forward for that. You guys can try to guess who the mystery guest is, but we haven't had too many, so we'll be introducing some new faces to you guys for the first time on the podcast.
First time to the pod, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so definitely looking forward to that. Trying to expand our content, not just in terms of the type of stuff that we talk about, but also the kind of people we talk to. I know you guys probably, love hearing us all the time, but it'd be also interesting to hear some other perspectives on the podcast to kind of, share thoughts with, hear different perspectives and things of that nature as well. So we got some stuff brewing with that in terms of being able to bring more guests in, and this should hopefully be the start of us trying to add some more to the content as well. Like TV said beforehand, we got top 10 players coming up next week is something that kind of rounds out this series we've been working on over the last month and a half now. And before you know it, man, NBA training camp news will start dropping, and that's when we start getting into our mode, man. And that's when we start looking at stuff like power rankings. You start looking at stuff like what kind of free agency impacts are going to be the most important going into the NBA season. Me and TV always have our good old fill in the blank 21 question series that we do going into the NBA season starting. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming around the corner. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit the post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new podcasts. Obviously, TV mentioned at the top of the pod as well. Going to start trying to cut these down into bite size, more digestible sections as well for you guys. So if you have a favorite team that you're interested in, or just a certain topic from the podcast that might intrigue you a little bit more than listening to the whole thing, we're going to start having a lot more of that content available for you guys as well. So hopefully we're just trying to get better at optimizing the pod, man. More guests, more sections of the pod to be able to allow you guys to digest the content a little bit more, and more versatility within the stuff that we talk about, so you guys can get some more unique perspective besides your typical run-of-the-mill, national television topics where they scream over the Los Angeles Lakers every week.
100%. We got you with the short content. We got you with the medium, and now we got you with the long. So be sure to look through all of that. YouTube, Instagram, all that good stuff. We appreciate all of y'all's support. And again, next week we're going to be back with our top 10 players. One of the most highly anticipated videos that we're trying to do as well. So be on the lookout for that. Should be a good one. We want to thank you guys for all your support. Again, check out all the links below. Jay and I will be back next week for the new episode. And again, check out for some other evergreen episodes coming out in the future as well. We have, a big one coming with 2 guests coming up pretty soon. But yeah, hope you have a fantastic day. This is TV. This is Jay. We're signing out. Peace.